Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. After the release of The River, Bruce Springsteen had already established himself as the voice of working class America. However, it was Born in the USA that launched him into global superstardom. With its anthemic sound, polished production and raw storytelling, Springsteen unknowingly crafted an album that would become a cultural phenomenon. Despite a mix of pop-driven synths, electronic beats and heartfelt gritty lyrics, Born in the USA was initially met with mixed feelings, yet it quickly became one of the most iconic albums in rock history, transforming Springsteen into a worldwide superstar. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, man. And you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. I'm looking forward to discuss this album. It's a bit of a monster of an album, isn't it? In terms of in terms of the name of it, it's almost like I'd have a debate as to whether it's up there in quality with like Pet Sounds and Sergeant Pepper, but in name value, it's up there, isn't it?
And
one of the biggest albums in rock history.
Yeah, and in terms of its importance to rock music, for sure. Yeah,
and its cultural, where it sits in the culture,
Yeah.
So I'll start off as usual with just a few album details, and since this is your album, you're going to sort of take us through what you want to talk about, and then we'll discuss it. So the album was released on June 4th, 1984, recorded over a 2-year period between January 1982 and March 1984, and it was recorded at the Power Station and the Hit Factory Studios in New York City. The genre, again, debatable. Heartland rock is what I see the main sort of topic as, but there's
was that a thing at the time, though?
Well,
or is this like a modern
I think
term?
We'll talk about that in a second. The length is 46 minutes and 40 seconds, and it was released on the Columbia label and produced by Bruce Springsteen, Chuck Plotkin, Stephen Van Zandt, and John Landau. So, do you know, before you take us where you want to take us, I just want to talk about that Heartland rock thing, because you know how much I love genres and seeing what came out of one over another. And the Heartland rock thing is really interesting because it's basically a kind of, it's almost like there's no real musical characteristic to it. It's more about the content of what's being sung about. So if I hold on, I've got the Wikipedia page up. Check this out, okay? The term Heartland rock was not coined to describe a clear genre until the 1980s, so it is albums like this that sort of made Heartland rock a thing. In terms of style, it often uses straightforward rock music, sometimes with elements of Americana, with basic rhythm and blues lineup of drums, keyboards, and occasional horn sections like a saxophone. However, this common definition may represent an oversimplification, given that Born in the USA made heavy use of synthesizers. So it's the idea lyrically is that it talks about America and what we call blue collar workers. So people who do manual labor jobs, often not paid sort of, lots of amount of money. And it's kind of like a people's genre of music. Do you know what I mean? Music for the people.
Music for the people.
I'd go as far as saying it's not entirely. It's not political. It's more cultural. Do you know what I mean?
It is.
It's not.
Would Oasis be the equivalent in the UK?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I go as far as saying it's not. It's not emphasizing a political point. It's just talking about the culture or certain subcultures in America.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's about the lifestyle in the country more than anything else.
Yeah.
And there's a lot about like life in typical towns rather than cities. I guess there's a lot of that in the album about leaving your hometown, about meeting your old friends and reflecting on how life has changed and stuff like that. So I think the album has a lot of that. And maybe he took it to another level compared to his previous work. And shall we start talking about how he wrote the songs for the album?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is I was looking for the information about the album, and I found anything between 50 and 90 songs is the number that some different journalists would claim that he wrote. The number of songs he wrote for the album. So anything between 50 and 90 songs. But that was initially intended to be the double album. So it should be what is Nebraska and this. There should be one album with one part of it, the first half of it being just Bruce and his guitar and harmonica. and the other half of a full band. The E Street Band, who was like they were his really good friends and proper bandmates in the real sense of the word,
Yeah.
like touring together and spending a lot of time together. They were really, really good friends, and they knew how to play together. I think the band was really good at capturing his sound. But initially, when he started writing the songs, so he went to a ranch in New Jersey in 1981, September, if I'm not wrong, to start writing the songs. So he isolated himself from the world to write songs, which I think is an amazing way of creating art.
Yeah.
You don't think about what's going on out there. You don't necessarily talk to people. You just do your thing. But I think the result of that is like lots of those songs were like kind of finished when he did the demos for the album. So Nebraska, I think, is made of the demos. They didn't change much. He recorded himself with a tape recorder in his bedroom in this place, and that was it. That was an album. So some of those songs made it to Born in the USA. He was trying to do everything with a full band, but realized it didn't quite work. Though some of those songs were designed to be played on acoustic guitar only. So he tried some stuff with the band, didn't quite work, and then he tried other songs that actually worked, and he finally decided to do instead of a double album, like one release and another one, and then he released Nebraska first. There's an interesting comment from what's his name, John Landau, one of the producers. Check what he said about it. So he knew, in my opinion, that on one hand he was on something that could be really explosive and raise his profile as a mass artist. He had reservations about that. No secret. And he'd written this other collection of songs, the Nebraska material, that was very independent, certainly not geared towards mass appeal. Two extremes, same songwriter, same time. It's like he had his Star Wars and his art movie in his hand at the same moment, and he went to Nebraska first. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
because some people, they are capable of creating something extremely artistic, without thinking about, I don't want this to be commercial. That's my art.
Yeah.
And some people can do commercial stuff in a very natural way. You sometimes need to adapt in order to be capable of doing both. And he seemed to be really good at both sides of songwriting and production, without without sounding artificial at any point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that because I was confused when I was reading people saying, oh, following on from the river. And I was like, well, what do you mean following on from the river? Because Nebraska's there. So then I went back and listened to a bit of Nebraska, and you can obviously tell it's a different album.
And
I think
it's
what's
darker,
interesting,
isn't it?
yeah, but it's just acoustic, isn't it? It's like an acoustic guitar and a harmonica. And what's interesting about it is that I imagine lyrically, because he was in that same zone, it captures the same essence as what he's trying to portray or what he did portray in Born in the USA. So to have two different, albums sonically, in terms of one being very stripped, very raw, very laid back, acoustic, harmonica, and one being very polished, very produced, synthesizer heavy, it's just fascinating that he managed to do both those albums and sort of write them in the same headspace. And you're right.
Yeah.
I read somewhere 70 to 90 songs. Just to clarify, that's 70, not 17.
Yeah.
70 to 90 songs that he wrote on his ranch, or not his ranch, the ranch he rented for that time. And I think it's a really interesting package, Born in the USA, because when you hear Nebraska before and think that as I said, he's in the same headspace. Probably best.
Exactly. Like there's the guy said, the art movie and Star Wars made at the same time.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
What is that?
I think Born in the USA, how short it is quite reflective of why it does so well as well, because it gets across all of its points in only 12 not very long songs. So I think it does that really, really well. Just a quick note for listeners and viewers. In the description below in the show notes, you're going to find a little playlist, which is our dedicated Spotify playlist that we put on for every episode, where in that playlist will be every song we mention in the episode, including every song on the album we're talking about, and then any other songs we mention throughout the episode, I'll add into the playlist so that whilst we mention, or when we mention them, you can sort of go along and have a listen to them as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where did you want to go next?
there's a couple of more things that I think influenced the songwriting process and the album. Apart from his isolation in that sense, like not having any other musician to write with him in that room. The other thing is like a change of lifestyle, because he started doing therapy and started lifting weights. So if you see Bruce Springsteen in this day and age, how old is he now? I think it's 74, something ridiculous. Like I'll say ridiculous because he looks like he's 40, 45 tops.
He's 75.
Yeah. And he's like super fit, like, and got this big muscles, really like energetic guy. If you see any of his live performances nowadays, it's like it's almost like a function rock band. They play everything. They play all his hits, and then they look at the audience. What do you guys want to hear? And if people shout the Beatles, they play the Beatles. If people say, I want to hear some Chuck Berry, they play some Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
I watched him on TV performing in Brazil, Rock in Rio, one of the biggest music festivals in the world. And there's a thing that we do that, when people say, play Free Bird in America and the UK, in Brazil, we say, play Raul. So Raul Seixas is a famous rock singer in Brazil. And it's like a local thing, right? Like no one knows him in the UK or America. When people shouted that as a joke, he played it.
No.
And sung in Portuguese. So it's like that. He's a true entertainer, like phenomenal, like artist. But I think when you're an artist and you're singing about human feelings and stuff like that, it really easily leads to depression, drugs, and all that stuff. And you can see he's committed to be mentally and physically well. And it started at that time when he was writing the songs for Born in the USA and Nebraska. He started weightlifting and therapy at the time. So to like basically improving his mind and his body. And that actually, I think that's why he's still capable of performing today. That's why he never got involved with the celebrity sort of lifestyle. He's focused on himself and being like mentally and physically fit, which is, good for him. Well, like really well done. Anyway, should we move on to the production side of it?
Well, we can, but
anything else?
Well, I was just really interested about the song "Born in the USA" itself.
Yeah,
because one thing I read about the whole album, and a few things that I don't really think we're going to talk about it today, but the themes of the album I heard were misinterpreted because people thought it was a really patriotic album because they heard "Born in the USA" and they're like, "Hell yeah, we're born in the USA," that.
Yeah.
But actually, I was reading that there's sort of two separate things that influenced "Born in the USA." He was reading "Born on the 4th of July" by an author called Ron Kovich, and this inspired Springsteen to meet up with veterans. I think it was
this guy was a Vietnam veteran, isn't it? Yeah.
So he was inspired to meet these Vietnam War veterans. And he wrote this song called Vietnam. And Vietnam would actually turn out to be Born in the USA. But the reason it would turn out to be that is because he met with a director called Paul Schrader, who approached him to write the song for this unmade film, that the film was going to be called Born in the USA.
All right.
But then, then the song that Springsteen wrote called Vietnam turned into Born in the USA, and the film
and the movie changed the title.
Yes, and the film was meant to be called Born in the USA, but that became Light of Day, but it still featured that song, or maybe it was a different song, but it featured.
I think he wrote another one as well for the movie.
There's a couple he wrote, Shut Out the Light and Brothers Under the Bridges, that he wrote after being inspired by meeting the Vietnamese or the Vietnam.
Yeah, I've heard it at some point. It was called the song was called Vietnam Blues, something like that as well. So it was definitely, it was a little bit more specific about Vietnam, but then I think it became more about the death of the American dream in a way, isn't it? It's like it still mentions like being sent to war, to kill people in another country.
So they put a rifle in my hands, send me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man born in the USA.
Exactly. It's like that really strict view, like those guys are the enemies, go there, kill them. Yeah. It's beautiful lyrics,
Yeah,
and as I said, like you see the album cover, you see the title of the song and the album, you think, yeah, he's going full on patriotic.
yeah.
Well, it's not really that, and it's funny because when people do that, John Fogerty from Creedence is really good at that as well. They're not necessarily saying that they don't like their country,
Not
right?
at all. No,
Yeah.
agreed. Not at all. It's
It's the
more.
opposite. They think the country deserves better and
Yeah,
people deserve better.
it's an observation, isn't it?
Yeah,
And the funny thing about artists like that is that if you were to have, right, let's say Oasis, okay, Oasis sang a song about the USA.
yeah,
You can understand the patriotism from Americans being like, well, who the hell are these Brits to talk about
yeah,
us like that? But when you have someone like Bruce Springsteen, whose musical journey has been dedicated to singing about the USA, and John
yeah,
Fogerty of Creedence, who has
yeah,
sung so much about his part of the USA, you can't help but listen
yeah,
because you can't say, oh well, you're not true a patriot, dude. It's Bruce Springsteen. What do you
yeah.
mean? You know, like so.
Exactly.
It's important that artists like this have their say on cultural. Or, do you know what I mean? It's not. I'm not saying it's mandatory, but it's like, you know, that they're putting out what
It's
they want to
yeah,
reflect.
yeah, exactly. There's one thing as we're talking about lyrics. I think what I would say is like he communicates with the working class people, right? But
Very
it's
well.
not. There's something about his approach to the lyrics that I initially thought, because I didn't remember. Well, I actually never paid attention to the lyrics when I first listened to the songs from this album. I was really young, didn't understand anything about English, so I couldn't really grasp the true meaning of the lyrics. So I actually, I thought it was a patriotic kind of vibe, and maybe I thought it was about um, bigger issues, or maybe like things things that would change the fate of a country, that kind of stuff. But it's not a universal approach in the sense. It's not like a really broad approach. This is about where America is going. I think it's more about the individuals who live in America and how their lives are maybe affected by what's going on around them. But he's not. I think he's addressing the emotional and psychological, spiritual side of that person's struggle, rather than one political issue with the whole country. That's how I perceive it. I think it's open to interpretation anyway.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
Where do you want to go
yeah.
next?
Well, we spoke about the lyrics, so let's see.
Oh, if, sorry,
I'm doing a last today, so I'm with I have a proper like kind of
the schedule,
schedule,
the
like
categories.
categories.
If
I don't normally do that. So going back to the previous topic, which you made me skip, we're going to talk about production.
sorry,
See?
Felipe.
You're doing a Felipe. Right. So the production, right? That's an interesting thing, because like imagine recording that 100% acoustic album, and the second part of that project, which is Born in the USA, is very, very modern for the time, of course. Like some of the synth sounds, I just can't stand those sounds. I mean, great playing, like everything is amazing, but it was just like very 80s.
Yeah.
I think the 80s have a sound that really didn't survive the test of time.
No.
In terms of synths, in terms of some of the vocal effects and stuff like that. Although what I like about the vocals is it sounds really raw. Most of it is just like it doesn't. It's not overproduced in terms of vocals, I believe, and it's actually not too loud in the mix. You would expect him as a solo artist to have the vocals on top and the band kind of in the background, but it's about all the instruments. And I think the mix is really good in that sense. Now, what I think really, really defines the sound of this album is snare drum and the synths.
Yeah.
Right?
and they're all there in the first 10 seconds of the
That's
first song.
it. So it's like, all right, I think that they have to have thought it through. I don't think it's an accident. Like they have this really particular snare sound, a really particular like keyboard or synth sound, and it kicks off with those two instruments and the vocals.
Yeah.
So that is the complete opposite of Nebraska right away. No acoustic guitars for those first seconds of music. No bass, no guitars, just like snare drum, keyboards. And it sounds very electronic in a way. There's something about like the way they arranged drums and guitar for this album, which is there's not too many guitar solos, there's not too many drum fills. it's all about loops, in my opinion. It's all about like repeating phrases. One of the songs, let me check which one is it that I really thought that the acoustic drums were played as if it was like a computer drum loop. Although it sounds very acoustic, it's just the interpretation. I need to find the exact one. Which one was it? Oh yeah. I'm on Fire. Yeah, one of the hit singles of the album. It's got an acoustic riff, loads of kind of ambience in the vocals, but still the vocals somehow sound really raw, I think, for the way he sings. But it's a simple drum beat that never changes. So one thing all the way to the end. It could be like modern production, you copy and paste, but that one is actually played. Sounds like it played all the way to the end, but it's like designed to sound like a modern drum loop, although it's very acoustic. Yeah, so you have that. So the drums are very straightforward. The guitar never takes a full-on guitar solo. It's just like phrasing around the vocals.
That's really interesting because I think one of the songs has like a little sort of guitar solo intro, but other than that, the main sort of thing, the main solo you hear will be a saxophone solo in this album, which again, very 80s. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, undoubtedly there is a sound, there is a cohesive sound to it, and you can hear it and you think straight away Bruce Springsteen. But if we look at the genres of the album, there's just a bit of everything, isn't there? I mean, rock and roll, Working on the Highway and Glory Days, I thought was kind of rock and rolly, even a bit bluesy, just sort of the chord changes going up to the four and coming back down. You've got the obvious, what we call stadium rock with like anthemic choruses, echoey vocals, very reverby snare drums, Born in the USA and I'm Going Down. Now, my favorite song of the album, No Surrender. I found it to be so gospely, very soul-y. Maybe
Beautiful
that could have
song.
just been the backing vocals, but there's just a sound to it, and it's almost like it's almost like the vulnerability in his vocals, what you can hear in songs like No Surrender. He's singing for the people.
Yeah, No Surrender's got my favorite line in the whole album.
Go for it, tell us.
We learn more from a 3-minute record than we ever learned in school. And I think that is like beautiful. So real in many ways.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's almost like the everything around you, like the school and everything, you learn in the like through the official path.
Yeah.
Doesn't actually prepare you for real life. And when we listen to a song like Bruce Springsteen's music, you listen to that, it's like, oh yeah, that's what life is all about. I think there's a lot of it.
That's a great point. And then also,
and it's a promise to stick to your dreams, isn't it? It's like two people promise to each other to stick to their dreams, and I want to play music, we want to do, I think that's what the song's all
very
about.
Inspirational.
Yeah.
You've also got the obvious pop influences there, because this album did take, because I was into Bruce Springsteen for a long time ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and my favorite album was Darkness on the Edge of Town, but I also listened to Born to Run. I was kind of playing those two albums, and it's funny because the defining main difference between those two albums and this one is the synth. There was very... Musically, I always found his music really busy because you have like 2 or 3 guitarists, then there's the piano player. The piano player will switch his sound up to be an organ, and then saxophones, drumming. But the fact that they've dialed back on the drumming, because as you said, the drumming is incredibly simple in this album.
Yeah.
Most songs just have one sort of beat going through it most of the time.
Yeah.
The bass often, I don't know, it's just become more stadium rock. And what we mean by that is just listen, when I hear the word stadium rock, the first song I think of is Born in the USA, because I just imagine a stadium full of people all throwing their hands up, Born in the US, just all pumping their fists with an echoey, reverby vocal there. But there is a more of a pop sensibility to this album. There is, I think songs like, what have I got here? Bobby Jean and Dancing in the Dark. Now, compared to what we know 80s pop music to be like, it's not pop. But compared to what we know of Bruce Springsteen before, it is pop.
Yeah, exactly. And interesting you mentioned Bobby Jean. There's an interesting story about that one. It's a farewell song to Steve Van Zandt, the guitar player. because he was leaving the band, and
Oh,
Springsteen felt like he wasn't interested in keep going anymore, and he started his own solo career. They remained friends. There wasn't an argument or anything,
yeah.
but so he wrote the song for him. So it's a
Wait,
fictional character, but it's actually him, and it's talking about when they were teenagers, always listening to the same music, really good friends, and all that stuff.
yeah,
So
that's
beautiful
cool.
song, beautiful lyrics.
Well, I think Steve Van Zandt actually still plays with him now, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does. I think they kind of ended the band in '87, if I'm not wrong. The E
Okay.
Street Band was no more at some point, and then they got together again in 2002. I might be wrong about the dates, but something like that. Yeah, so they play together now again. Yeah, I think.
And he
Uh,
actually plays, Stephen Van Zandt plays, I knew him because he plays one of the main characters in The Sopranos.
all
And
right,
he's in the whole show. Like he's not just there as a little cameo. So yeah, that's how I found out about
that's
him.
amazing. I didn't know he was an
Um,
actor.
but yeah, yeah. Well, I think he was a musician first, and then they suddenly saw this guy who could play a mafia character, and they were like, "Let's get him in."
Yeah,
But yeah, the other thing, the production, which we sort of moved on to a little bit. John Landau, I've heard that he played a big part in this album,
yeah,
sort of shaping the sound. The synth-heavy arrangements. Now, as we said, sort of listening back now, quite outdated. Probably
yeah,
doesn't sit that well, especially compared to his older music. But I did feel that there was this good balance between this kind of live emotive energy that the rock band were playing and then putting a synth over it. It didn't feel too polished. Do you agree?
yeah.
Because it is polished, but there's degrees, and I
Maybe in
don't
terms
feel
of
this was too much.
the sounds, but like the arrangements are like just enough, exactly
Yeah,
what you need, the
I
right
agree.
amount of each instrument. I don't think there's too much of anything in the album. Even like the sax solos, they kind of dominated the '80s, and there's a
Yeah,
couple of them in the album, and it's cool. It works. It's not too much, So
yeah.
not, I think I think it was the production in general was really well done, and I believe Bruce Springsteen had total control about what was going on. So the producers are there, they're guiding him, they give him the ideas, but he's famous for being in charge of everything. From the cover to the marketing, from he wants things should go in a certain way.
Mm,
The fact that he thought that Nebraska would be a good choice to release before this one was well thought, because imagine there would be no impact if he did the other way around. So
yeah,
Nebraska would sound weak, and this
yeah,
way it sounds like a warm up to Born in the USA. And also he thought a lot about the order of the songs, So it's like a set list. It's like you go to a gig, that would be a perfect set list. If those were the only songs in a gig in that particular order, they work really well. Also, they released about 7 singles, right? And throughout about like
yes.
a year and a half or 2 years, I don't know. They just they kept releasing that was a really good marketing plan. I think some bands were doing that, but no,
I,
I don't think everyone did that.
I've got it here. So the promotional campaign was massive. 7 singles, 5 music videos, 3 songs had dance remixes. Can you
Wow,
imagine that?
so
Like that's crazy.
that is clever, commercially speaking. Maybe the diehard fans don't like that kind of stuff, but if
Best-selling album of
but
1985.
well,
Just going to find out if that was
not a
in USA.
surprise. There's something interesting about the end of the album for me.
Okay.
Like the last 2 songs, Dancing in the Dark. Well, so write me if I'm wrong, but Dancing in the Dark was the first single, and My Hometown, the last single.
Oh, I can
Those are the
tell you.
2 songs that
Let
close the album.
um yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah. And yeah,
And
you're right,
what
the two
and,
closers.
and what a clever choice to not release Born in the USA as the first single, right? And then you have Dancing in the Dark does not prepare you for the album. It's a really clever choice for first single, because it's like the lyrics about a man looking for his way out of boredom. It's just like, I'm bored, I just want to go out and dance or meet someone. And there's a point in the lyrics where he says, there's something happening somewhere. I know, I just know there is. So it's like there's something, I need to do something
There's something
anywhere.
going.
Uh, and
I
and
think,
it doesn't reflect the style of the album
yeah.
perfectly, but it's
Well,
very
well,
commercial.
that's exactly what I was going to say, as an accessible way to make someone be like, oh my God, wait, Bruce Springsteen, the rock guitarist, he's released a
Yeah.
song that sounds like this.
Yeah.
And you know, how many people are you going to get to buy the album just by playing
Yeah.
that? And do you know what? The point is, it's not even cheeky, because I think if you listen to Dancing in the Dark and like it, there's plenty to like on Born in the USA. You might not dig songs like Born in the USA, Working on the Highway, No Surrender, because they are a bit more rocky. But
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I'm saying. For every, even though those songs are rocky, they're still poppy as well, aren't they? They
Yeah.
have those characteristics, the you know, the really easy melodies, the anthemic choruses, the sing-along choruses.
Maybe what makes some of those songs more pop than rock are the lyrics. It's like the kind of like the one I just mentioned, Dancing in the Dark, is it's not, there's no like reflection about life. There's no philosophy in it.
Yeah,
It's nothing about there's nothing negative. There's nothing bittersweet about it. It's just like, you know, in the end, is someone who's looking for a way to have fun.
yeah,
And
that's a good
when you
point.
listen to My Hometown, that's not as pop as that one, because the lyrics are a bit darker in that way. So the guy's
Mm,
leaving his hometown because things are getting rough, and there's no jobs left. It's like he loves his hometown. He's got to leave. Life is not great, you know, as it used to be in the past. And
yeah.
he's showing his son, you know, his hometown. So look around, that's a hometown, the same way his dad did to him. So it's really emotional. I think it does connect with people, but it's not as commercial in that way. And although all the singles did really well, they
Mm,
all went to the like top 10, all of them, which
yeah.
is insane. Imagine 7 singles from an album with, so basically more than half of the album was released as singles, and all of them made it to the top 10. That is like absurd. Like
Mm.
I don't think anything like that is going to happen again.
And that's over half of the album as well,
Yeah,
when you think
yeah.
about it.
It's
Jesus.
insane. It's insane.
Um,
Yeah.
cool. What do you want? What do you want to go next?
Um, so just in terms of the contrast of the songs, I think there's um, there's 2 songs that come like, well, actually, just after Born in the USA, you have Cover Me, which is a very straightforward 4 on the floor pop song. You know, it's that 4 on the floor is a drum beat. It has the bass drum playing on every beat. So it's like keep punching like that on every beat all the way to the end of the song. And that's kind of, it's almost like a disco song. And it was written for Donna Summer to record. So I think he was co-producing
Oh,
an album with her, or writing songs for her album, something like that. He was working in partnership with her. He wrote a few songs for her. That was meant to be one of them. And in the end, he said, no, that's mine. I'm going to put it on my album. So it's a disco song,
yeah.
completely different.
Nice.
And then you have I really like Darlington County and Working on the
Ah,
Highway.
can we just,
Storytelling, you
yeah,
know.
let's talk about Darlington County,
Yeah.
because the biggest thing I hear in it, do you know when I hear it? I hear the band.
Oh wow.
It's the one, because I kind of my head subconsciously put two and two together, because I was reading, it said, you know, Bruce, this album is different from Bruce's old music, which is more rocky, more Americana-y. And then I'm
Yeah.
hearing some of the chord changes and the la 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 in Darlington County, and I
Yeah.
went Americana plus this song, the band. And I just thought
Wow, I never
I could
thought
hear
of
the
it. Yeah.
band singing that. It just has that. You've got songs like Born in the. It's just so. It's so funny, man. It's so confusing, because the album works as a one cohesive album, but Born in the USA and Darlington County are such different songs. Born in
Totally
the
different.
USA is so stadium rocky, it's synthy, it's produced. Darlington County has that five guys around a microphone singing la la la, you know, that feel
Yeah.
to it. It has that Americana
It's
thing.
great. And the lyrics as well. It's like Born in the USA is very critical. It's very like it's heavy, you know, when you think, if you really think about the war, you really think about this veteran's life after war, and you know, like no one needs him anymore. It's a really sad and heavy lyric. So
Mm,
when you listen to Downtown County, it's like 2 mates having fun in a typical American town, chasing girls, like listening to rock music,
yeah.
and that's it. There's nothing to it in a way. It's very simple, and I think people can relate to that. It's like when it's that song for me is when you stop thinking about the problems for a bit, have some fun, and then you go back to reality. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
or is it reality? I think, you know, like there's, you know, good and bad things in life, isn't it? All the time. So I think the album reflects the positive and negative sides of life in general, but more specifically life in America. Walking on the highway again, it's this guy runs away with a girl who's presumably underage by the sound of the lyrics, and then I think her brother comes after her, and he ends up in prison, right? So the thing is, it starts with this guy walking on the highway, and it ends with him working on the prison. So, so he's. It's like, and he messed up with his life, you know, and it's really, really clever lyrics.
I think it's a really cool rock and roll song, all in all. As in, even the lyrics reflect the rock and roll kind of, you know, you hear those sort of funny
like
songs.
Misbehavior, like doing the wrong thing, end up in jail, but it's still up tempo, kind of like energetic.
But with a comedic element to it, in the sense of, well, I started, you know, working on the highway, and now I'm working in prison. Which just really does encapsulate that rock and roll feel to it, doesn't it? Where it's like, you know, how many songs did Jerry Lee Lewis do that had a little bit of comedy to it, you know? And it's that. I actually thought of Jerry Lee Lewis for, you know, obvious reasons. This is his, you know, his lifestyle and stuff. But I don't think he ended up in jail. But yeah. One thing lyrically I want to just touch on is how do you think, or what do you think about the contrast between the upbeat, pleasant, anthemic sound of the album and actually going deep into the reflective lyrics? Because it's kind of an oxymoron. They shouldn't really work with each other.
No, they a little bit like Help by the Beatles.
Yeah.
Really sad lyrics, up-tempo song. People singing along, they don't even realize that it's really depressive. Yeah. And I think maybe he was like, I really want to talk about these things, but I need to wrap it up in a package that doesn't make it feel that dark and sad. I think that's it. Because I think it's like I wanted to be commercial. Yeah, I want people to dance and have a good time, but also I want them to think about life, to reflect on stuff. Yeah. And I think maybe it's intentional. Oh, certainly is intentional, like as everything Bruce Springsteen does. But I think it works, man. It works. It's just it's weird if we start thinking about the lyrics, but I think music, right, in general, has several layers of interpretation. So imagine if you don't know the language, right, and you're listening to a song like "Born in the USA." You don't speak English. You're listening to it. Oh, it's a nice beat. You can dance to it. You can jump. You can you can have a good time listening to it. And if you know what the lyrics are going on about, you can think, oh, it's about the Vietnam War. Or is about what happens to your life after you're no longer needed by people, or is about suffering in general. So there's so many layers. Or you can just think about the keyboard sound, or you can just there's so many elements in a song that can make you connect with the song. Yeah. And I think he did a perfect job putting all of it is the full package for the whole album. All lyrics are somehow meaningful or intentionally simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just just to quickly respond to what you said. Regardless of how people interpret the song, Bruce has got his message through.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what matters to an artist. We've played with artists. We know that they like or they need.
They like people to listen to them. That's what it is. Yeah.
And to get their message across.
Yeah.
And he's done that. Even if you have a good time dancing to the song, not realizing it's about the Vietnam War, not exclusively, but he still gets to say his piece. It's like it's like "Gimme Shelter" by the Rolling Stones, isn't it? Like you've got this wonderful song that's quite gospely in places and quite upbeat, and then you realize it's actually quite a macabre song.
To the point, like Reagan wanted to use the song in his campaign, but he didn't like Reagan and so didn't want to get involved with politics, and he was like, "No, I don't want you to use my song." And still, Reagan mentioned him in speeches and use him as an example of a good American citizen. So like it's like even though maybe the president didn't get the message, he still admired Bruce Springsteen for the quality of his art and his hard work. So so that's so again, layers of interpretation. And I don't think anyone would actually get the message unless you have lived that guy's life. So the whole thing with songwriting is that, isn't it? Like people, we're here analyzing stuff and giving opinions about stuff, but in the end of the day, the artist knows what he was feeling at the time, which doesn't mean he still feels like that, which doesn't mean
it
it's
captures a moment
entirely
in time.
true. Yeah, it's all of it is kind of half fictional, half autobiographic, isn't it?
Yeah,
in a way.
exactly.
Right. Cool.
Anything else you want to say?
Well, I'm ready for my monologue.
Okay, let me see if I've got it. No, I mean, I've just got some notes about the success of the album because it is undoubtedly, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, it is a massively successful album. We talked about the campaign and the singles. It sold over 30 million copies worldwide, and it remains his best-selling album and one of the best-selling albums of all time, actually. Now, interestingly, he was a bit critical of the album upon its release. In the 90s, he was, I can't remember where I wrote, I can't remember where I wrote this, but he said something like, um, I don't want to say anything in case I got it wrong, but basically, he wasn't overly enamored with the release of it. And I do wonder if that was because of how polished it was. Maybe he wasn't sure about taking this new step into a more popular, more accessible sound. But I mean, for his bank balance,
I'm glad
it paid
he
off.
did that.
Yeah, and for music history.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say it really helped popularized, as we were talking about at the start of the episode, the Heartland rock feel that America was that was happening, because you had guys like Bob Seger as well, Tom Petty. These guys were embodying good American rock music, but lyrically were looking deeper than the foundations of America's a prosperous country, and it is a prosperous country, but there's stuff below the surface that we're going to address. And Born in the USA was almost like the iconic Heartland rock album, the album that popularized it and got people actually saying, okay, this is what Heartland rock means.
Yeah, it's like it's like modern folk music in a way, right? You talk.
Absolutely, yeah, and I completely agree with you. Yeah, this is Heartland rock is the 80s version of folk music.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like he's the 80s version of Bob Dylan. I don't know.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because there is one song. I wish I could remember what it was. Anyway, I was just quickly going through the songs. There's one song that reminds me of Hurricane by Bob Dylan.
Oh, wow.
Where he's singing and it's quite fast and he's talking through the songs. And he's
he uses a lot of the kind of spoken kind of vocals, isn't it? Like, instead of just he's not melodic all the time. Sometimes sounds like he's just talking to you, he's just having a conversation. And I like that.
Yeah. Sorry for the gap, everyone. I'm trying to play through the songs quickly just to figure it out. Anyway, I can't remember it, but there's one song, and it's just the way he sings it, and the way he's telling this story. And it just completely reminded me of Hurricane by Bob Dylan, which is a song that just has the same sort of chord progression repeat about 10 times, but each time Bob Dylan tells another in a verse, he tells another part of this story, and you're sat there, and we know Bob Dylan's a poet and a lyricist, more so than a musician maybe, but
is it not Glory Days?
Let me check quickly. I want to,
because Glory Days is a story, it's like three people talking about when life was better, so like
I think it is, yeah.
But like back in the day, things were better. So they go. So it ends up with the same chorus about someone singing about their glory days, but life is not the same anymore. And it's again one of my favorites in the album.
I think it is, yeah. I think it's Glory Days.
Probably my favorite in the album.
Really, Glory Days,
because of the storytelling in it. Yeah. Like it's like three people reflecting on their glory days and complete different lifestyles and stories. But they all like thinking about, it was really fun back in the day.
Is that your favorite song?
Yeah, lyric wise for sure. And it makes you appreciate what you've got in life and think about, like, maybe in the future I'm going to be looking back at this thinking those were my glory days,
Yeah.
It's that one is it's kind of interesting because on one hand you're thinking about things were better. On the other hand, it's like I'm glad I have these memories. right?
Yeah,
It's not
even in the
like,
darker days, there's
yeah,
still
you can
things to take.
remember what you did back in the day and had
Yeah,
a good time. So it's super cool. I
exactly.
love it.
I No Surrender, I think, is my favorite. I just
Oh,
think the chord progression is just really lovely. The melody as well, and he does this again. I've told you before how emotionally attached I get to certain keys of songs,
yeah.
and to hear this song and some of the changes in the key it's in, and the vulnerability in his vocals, where he's actually sort of talking through this, and he does that a few times on the other albums I liked, Born to Run and Darkness on the Edge of Town. There's a few songs on there that I just think are so emotive and so wearing his heart on his sleeve. But yeah, No Surrender and Darlington County are my favorites. And I need to give a massive apology to the song Born in the USA, because when I was a teenager, I worked in I was a chef in a kitchen, and I had Planet Rock on every time. Um, and whenever that song came on, because obviously I was cooking, I was busy, I never had a chance to focus on the song. I was so fed up because they played it once a day, and I would hear "bong" and that snare every time. I just hated it. So when I saw you put this album on the list to do, I was like, oh God, like you know me, I've got to remain impartial, I got to remain unbiased. But when I saw it, I was like, oh
Thought that
God,
synth and that snare.
that
No.
synth and that set, but even just listening to the song and just focusing on the song for 4 minutes 39 seconds, reading the lyrics, hearing the way he sings, understanding what he's singing about, it's a great song, and I need to sort
Yeah,
of give it
so
its credit.
don't listen to this song if you're cooking. Listen to
If
it
you're in
whilst you're
if
having a beer or something.
if
Maybe
you're
it's
in the
better.
kitchen
If you're in the
making
kitchen,
dinner,
just don't.
don't do it, because you won't appreciate it, and we should leave that as the lesson for today. Anyway, do you want to finish us off with your monologue?
Yes, I do. Just one more interesting fact about the
Go.
album. The album cover became really iconic, isn't it? It's one of the most famous album covers of all time. And it's very simple, probably didn't cost much money. It's just him and the American flag, and you can't see his face. You can see his back, not his face. And I like the fact there's like some people said, oh, he's staring at the flag, showing how much he loves the country. So some other people said, I think he's pissing on the flag. So there's millions of interpretations about it.
Is there going to be
And
what about the interpretation of hold on, let me just turn my camera off
mm,
so we can see it. What about the interpretation of is there Make America Great Again on his cap?
oh gosh,
I'm sure some people would
he
take that.
couldn't be because that
No, of
wasn't a
course,
thing
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time.
I am
Uh,
joking, but wouldn't that
yeah,
be
he's good.
funny?
Yeah, but it's the typical hat that people wear in
Yeah.
political campaigns, and it's very American, all of it. Um, and this is like right. His version of this is like I thought that the picture of my ass looked better than the picture of my face. So that's his justification for that. You know,
Oh, brilliant.
that's it.
Brilliant.
Why not?
That's a pair of good American genes right there,
Yeah,
isn't
really cool. Yeah,
it?
exactly. So it's somehow like it's almost sarcastic, and in a way, it's like it's almost like this is so typical. If you want something really American, that's what you're going to put on the album
Yeah.
cover. It's almost kind of sarcastic in a way, and also I think there's a bit of both, a bit of showing appreciation to his country and his culture, and also being critical of it.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
That's what how anyway.
No, no, no.
It's open to
I do
interpretation.
agree, and I think there is something interesting about facing the flag, because facing the flag is like you're facing the problems as well. If you're
Yes.
standing in front of the flag, proud, looking at the camera with the flag behind you, I feel that's way more patriotic and way more. It's almost like, there's problems with my country, but I'm going to ignore that because I'm going to turn my back to those problems. I'm going to, the
Yeah.
flag's behind me. But facing the flag equals facing the problems and realizing that there is a fantastic country in front of you, but it doesn't come without its problems, just
And
like any
also
country in the world.
maybe the fact that you can't see his face, he could be any American fella. So that's
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
Anyone. He could
exactly.
be anyone. So that's really
Cool.
clever. And he thought it through for sure.
Yeah,
He knew what he was doing.
excellent. Do you
All
want to finish
right.
us off with your monologue?
Yes. So here we go. The release of Nebraska showed a different side of Bruce Springsteen to his fans and maybe left them feeling like the E Street Band was no more. Little they know about its twin album, Born in the USA. Originally intended to be part of a double album project, Born in the USA had a life of its own and had to be performed with the full band. A whole range of emotions and experiences is displayed in the lyrics: loss, depression, love, reflecting on the past, misbehavior, hope, and lack of hope. The Boss has definitely cemented his reputation as a songwriter, singer, and musician with this album. But more than that, he showed his unmatched ability to communicate with the common people, exposing all sides of the American dream and reminding us all that life comes in cycles of good and bad times. It doesn't feel to me that this piece of work is mainly sad or negative. It's simply a reflection on reality, a portrait of America that is far from what we get from Hollywood movies or TV shows. On top of all of the beautifully written songs, Springsteen gave us an iconic cover and a brand new sound that helped rock and pop music to coexist in perfect harmony.
Perfect, man. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, perfectly said, man. Really good.
It is a hell of an album. I can't
say anything more than that. Yeah. It's a definitive rock album for the ages.
Yeah, I thank my dad for that, because he had that CD. It's just like somewhere in the house, like and I found it. So what's that? So Bruce Springsteen, born in the USA. And that was it. It didn't say anything else. I had to listen to it and make my own judgment. Yeah.
There you go.
Great.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, do us a favor and go down and rate us and review us, because any rating or review you give means we're going to be seen by more people in the charts. So scroll down, give us 5 stars, write a sentence. It takes 20 seconds of your time, but does the world of good to us, and we'd appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with new content. So thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. I'll make a promise here. If we have 7 billion downloads, I'm going to shave my beard. So yeah,
I don't want 7 billion downloads if that's the price. No, I'm joking. Of course, yeah. Actually, what am I talking about? I just love Felipe with a beard. Would I give up his beard for downloads? Yeah, of course.
7 billion. I want 7 billion. Okay.
That's a high threshold.
Anyway, so make sure you spread the word about this. Thanks for being with us once again. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
As usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.